Expanding from APAC into Europe or the US is a bit like pouring a Guinness. There's a right way to do it. You absolutely cannot rush it. And if you skip any part of the process, you will know immediately when you taste the results. Today's guest explains the whole thing through a pint of Guinness, and once you hear it, it makes complete sense. Edwin Lindsey is Managing Director of CS Life Sciences. He has guided over 100 MedTech companies through this expansion journey. And he is speaking at the MedTech World Asia in Hong Kong next month on exactly this topic. Edwin, welcome and tell me more about the Guinness.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So the Guinness, I know this is something that you like to mention all the time when you try to explain the whole journey
Yes.
of medtech and regulation. So let's start from that. Why Guinness, and how can you relate that apology to, for example, APAC companies who are looking into this whole journey of entry a new market?
Because I think so. If you look at Guinness, the process matters. You can rush the pour, but it's tended not to. But you can't fake the finish, so you have to make sure that the as I say, you can go fast with the pour, but it's how it settles and how you kind of present that to the end user. So you can't fake that. You can't fake the finish because it can affect how they perceive your product. And it's the exact same as a medical device. The process matters, the integration matters, so the kind of how you bring it to market, how you let the pour, taking your time, getting it right, and then obviously the finish where if you don't get the pour right or you don't get everything right, technically it won't taste very well. So it's a bit like the customer won't like it if you don't actually do it properly. So I've always had a way of now kind of putting things into the way of how you kind of relate medtech to Guinness and how it kind of correlates with each other.
So we are heading to the MedTech World Asia in Hong Kong, and that's why I want to drive this conversation into how companies in that side of the world face this whole process after clearance. How do they have to navigate new markets if they want to jump into the US or Europe? So from your perspective, you have the experience over 100 companies that you've been helping to transition this. How this journey looks like for an APAC company that is exploring US and Europe?
The APAC countries and the medtech startups in there, a lot of them have got very strong products, very good engineering. They understand the technology. If they've developed it for the APAC countries, then one of the things that maybe falls down is how the device is going to be adopted into the other countries. I go back to most startups I work with, whether it's APAC, whether it's UK, EU, US, and I don't actually start with a regulatory strategy. I turn around and say, what is the clinical flow? Is it going to be a disruptive technology? If it is, how do we stop that? Is people going to adopt this and start using it? And then actually somebody's going to buy this from you. So I think the APAC countries have got very good ways of working, very good engineering. What they probably, the bit where they potentially fall down is when they look at how do they get adoption? How do they get through reimbursement? And how do they, because the regulatory route is straightforward, because 9 times out of 10, they've done all the testing, they've done all the work on it, on the design. But will it fit into that country with regards to the clinical flow? Will it have to be adapted for different countries? So I think that's probably one area where they're looking at the aspect of it, because if they don't get the clinical flow correct and they get approval, it could put them back 12 to 24 months because they're going to have to readdress the product, have to update it, and then get reapproval. So they have to understand, and as they say, they don't just look at APAC, they just don't look at UK, US, EU, they have to look at them all. Where are they going to initially take this product to market? And what is the clinical pathway? What is how are people going to be using this in each country? And does the device or the product have to be different because of the clinical workflow in each country? And obviously they have to look at the reimbursement aspect of it, the clinicians and how they're going to use it. But all this comes together is somebody going to be able to use this clinically and where you don't have to make modifications from country to country? If you do, then that has to be addressed in the early stages as you develop it and design. And then if you don't, then you're building a device or a product that you can then integrate into various different countries. That probably upfront early on has to be done, which sometimes isn't done. They don't understand the whole process. So I think forget about regulatory at that moment in time. They're looking at clinical adoption. Are they going to get who's going to be paying for it and how that comes together? Regulatory then is then an add-on, which is very straightforward. Then you can adapt your regulatory plan to whatever country you're going to and whatever iteration or how you develop the product for that country. So that's probably one of the key areas, and as I say, not just for APAC but all countries where they want to take the product. How do they take it to market from a clinical point of view and clinical adoption, which then, as I say, feeds into reimbursement, feeds into regulatory, feeds into all other aspects of the taking the device to market.
Yeah, and as you well said, there's not just the regulation, because many companies, not only in APAC but also in other regions, focus and put all of their attention on the regulation part, right? They get the regulation, they get approved, and there's of course, celebration moment. But then, what's happening after, right? So, for a company that is sitting in Hong Kong, Singapore, Seoul right now, for example, thinking about moving to West, what that post-clearance landscape can, like, of course, feel very foreign. There's a whole reimbursement system that they do not know, a clinical evidence bar set by payers, not regulators, and a pricing dynamic that is completely different to the one they have in their home markets. So 3 battles. Out of these 3, which one do you think is the hardest for an APAC company to navigate?
I think it's to do with again, go back to the very start, the clinical flow. Is it the same clinical flow for all the countries? Because if it is, then the battle is slightly easier, but it's still a hard battle because you're looking at demographics, depending on what the medtech device is. You're looking at kind of all aspects of where they're going. As I say, the demographics is key. I think you're looking at who the payers are in each country. What evidence do they need? Because if you have to look at, as I said in the previous question about the clinical flow, which countries do you want to go into? You need to understand what the process is about the buyers in the countries, how you're going to get reimbursed. Because if you're not reimbursed, then nobody buys it, or it's harder to sell. So you're looking at what is the problem between, say, the NHS in the UK. You've got various EU health systems that you're going to have to buy into. You get then multiple health systems in the US. What evidence do you need from the clinical to be able to generate, not just for regulatory, but allow you to get reimbursement? So you've got the 3-pronged approach. You've got reimbursement, but you've got the clinical against reimbursement. You've got clinical for regulatory, and you're trying to get that enough information from that to be able to sell it to the end user, the clinician, that you're not just be able to sell it and get reimbursed, but it's actually can be used clinically and it's worthwhile. So you've got that kind of battle of regulatory versus reimbursement, with clinical sit in the middle and trying to get that defined. What evidence will make the payer buy it? But obviously, what evidence do you need to get regulatory approval? Sometimes they're not the same. So you have to make sure when you're designing the clinical trial, you're not just designing the clinical trial for APAC, you're designing it for collecting data that can be used in other countries around the world, where they can at least have a stepping stone into the countries. At least they can understand that it will fit into that health system. That there is a chance that it will be bought and purchased by the buyers. So because a lot of people think once they get regulatory approval, that's them, they've won the battle, and that there's nothing that they can now go and start selling. And then when they find out that they don't have the right clinical data for reimbursement, then they're technically taking a step back and they can't really sell. They're having to go out there and try and find a way of collecting that clinical data, which can potentially take longer to get reimbursed, get that data for reimbursement. And again, it probably falls down to, is there a reimbursement code for that product? If there isn't, then that's an even bigger battle. If there's no codes, understanding the code and understanding what clinical data you're going to need to get that code, as I said, because regulatory clinical is what people concentrate on, but a lot of startups, early stage companies, don't think about the reimbursement. It's getting better, but they have to think clinical, regulatory, clinical reimbursement, and how do we combine the two so you're not duplicating the work.
So CS Life Sciences, how do you actually play the role in here? How do you help navigating this whole new system, unfamiliar situations for companies that are looking into exploring these new markets?
So probably 5, 6 years ago, I could see the market changing. Your normal consultant, contractor, consultancy, there's a lot of small consultancies only had maybe one or two people. What we adopted was we try and do a one-stop shop for companies coming into Europe, UK, and US. We've tried to build a team that allows us to bring in clinical. That the clinical team can work with the reimbursement team. That we've got an associate. We go out and we work with a partner who does reimbursement. So what we've tried to do is we've got our own team at CS where we've got AI software, sterilization, biocompatibility. We've got all the regulatory aspects of it. We've got our own clinical team. We've got our own quality team. So we build the regulatory model. Our clinical people understand aspects of reimbursement. But what we also do then is as companies, especially the US, we look at how do we bring people into the US. So we've got associations with reimbursement companies. We've got associations with lawyers, tax attorneys. We've got insurance brokers. We have manufacturers. We have logistics and warehousing. So we look at the whole aspect of it. As we're developing early on, we will go in and do what I wouldn't say we do regulatory strategies right away. We go in early on and start to talk to them about the clinical pathway. As I said right at the start of this podcast, is about understanding where they're going in the world. What is the clinical pathway? Do they understand the clinical pathway? Because if they don't understand it in the countries they want to, we go out with our clinical team, start talking to people, starting understanding it. If we don't know it, we'll bring in people who we know that we have got a trusted advisors, so we know that they understand the startup game. That's one of the biggest things that what CS looked at 5, 6 years ago is how do we work with startups? How do we gain trust with startups? Because we always get the feedback that some consultancies didn't really deliver. They were just there to make money. What we looked at is how do we get these startups to business, get them to market? How do we bring in people that who we have got trusted advisors who understand the startup environment? So we look at that, as they say, we bring it together and we work together. And as if we have to bring advisors from Europe, we bring advisors for the UK and for the UK, i.e. NICE point of view to try and sell it into the NHS. We will bring people in that will help with our clinical team and our regulatory team that will allow the client to understand it very early so they can make a decision. Where do they want to go in the world? Oh, that's too expensive. I'll just leave that alone. Or we will go back later on, because obviously startups have got don't have infinite funds, but what we do is we try and manage that with them and try to make sure at least they're getting to market and they can start selling, generating the clinical data they need. So that's probably one of the key things that CS has done over the last 5 years, is they've built up this, as I say, I keep saying, a one-stop shop for startups, early stage companies that they can come to us and we understand the process. If it's something out with CS, we will bring in a trusted advisor that then the client can trust, understand, but they also understand the startup environment. So they're not just there to kind of bankrupt them.
Yeah. Then when, for example, there's everything in place, right? We have the clearance, we have the reimbursement, the system companies still don't see the product moving. There's no adoption. So what do you think goes wrong in this part of the process? And from your experience, of course, if this ever happened?
I think a lot of companies, they get the clinical data, but they've not really got KOLs. They've not got input from distributors. A lot of companies think it's going to sell itself, that they've got the best technology, and they don't actually see it. I know from a lot of startups I work with, the most successful ones have got various exits. Like the CEO, the CTO, the team are spending months in the US building their business. That some of their team moved to the US to build it. So if they I think it's not rocket science, it's commitment. They need to be able to, they're going to spend a lot of time away from home, especially if they're trying to break into the US. It's not, you can't do it remotely. You can do some things remotely, But some of it is a lot of the time is it's going out, visiting people, getting to know your customer or your potential customer. It's also down to who in your network can help you. You've got KOLs, so that's just where CS did help people with regards to we know people we know various surgeons, we know various distributors, so we'll tap into them and say, right, who can you help this company get into market? Have a look at the product, understand it. Is this something we can take forward? So I think it's the thinking that the device is already manufactured. It's great, and it will sell itself. It doesn't sell itself. You need a clinical champion, a clinical KOL who's not just in the minor leagues. You need to try and get somebody who's in the major leagues, who through a distributor or through a connection who will kind of support you, champion it, use your product, write white papers, stand up at podiums, really push it. It even sometimes come down to, and a lot of companies don't want to, is give it away free, get people using it, get them to write papers. That initial step of allowing them to use it for free, okay, a lot of companies don't want to do that, but if you allow them to use it for free, it's gaining their confidence that it can work. But also, you go visit them, go spend time with them, show them that you're serious, show them that you want to be there. It's not the most easiest markets in the world. Even the EU and UK is not easy. And it's EU is so fragmented with the various countries. Within each country, each health systems are different. You need to understand the health systems. You need to understand the purchasing system of the US. Like you've got whether it's a tender process or whether it's selling direct, whether it's selling through a distributor, whether it's selling as kind of individuals. So you have to understand the selling. But one of the key things is, can you get a clinical champion that can allow you to start to use it and get this adopted, who will then try and bring this to the market and start to build real clinical data in the marketplace that you can actually publish and actually show people that although we've done it in a clinical trial, but people are actually using this clinically, and allow you to start to scale. And again, it's going to come down to hard work. It won't sell itself, even if it think it's the best thing ever. It will take time to sell. You've got to convince people to change from what they're using. So that's going visit them, going understanding what their needs are, and also trying to, as I say, trying to get people to champion this product and get people who are going to really bang the drum for your device.
So we all know, of course, APAC companies, that side of the world is producing world-class medtech innovation right now. A lot of AI technology definitely is there. The ambition is there. So for those companies that actually get right the journey, moving into these markets that we've been talking about, how is the successful landscape looking like for them when they actually cross this and they are already settling there? And also, is the other way around working correctly? Is EU, Europe, US, and UK prepared for these companies, APAC technologies, looking to get into these health systems?
I would say one message to APAC companies is don't wait until after clearance. Simple. You start to build an integrated plan going forward. So you're looking at, as I say, you go back to the workflow, which countries you want to get into. So you're looking at how do we join up the dots? It's like, how do you build that jigsaw? You're looking at your clinical strategy, your regulatory strategy. What evidence do you need to generate? Reimbursement and the pricing, is it going to be different? Come down to, even if it's a connected device, cybersecurity. Is it the same cybersecurity around the world? Is it because it's different in each country? Every country wants a different way of meeting the requirements for cyber. You've got the market access. How do you, for each country, how do you access the country? Is it through distributors? Is it through independent sales reps? Is it through a tender process? Are you going to put your own team in there? So all this has to be built into this integrated plan, with regards to making sure you get adoption and early kind of commercialization. And that to help with that is what will prove. So when you're putting your integrated plan together, you're looking at which markets do I want to go to first, who pays, and have I got all the evidence? And also trying to get into the head of procurement. What will they ask? The KOLs, how do they get QLs? What's the realistic price? Because a lot of people will have a price in their head, but they may not be able to get that price. So you're looking at all that. That's the same as going to Europe, EU, UK, but even from the European companies going to APAC, they need to understand the culture in APAC. They need to understand that what information they have to give. Because a lot of companies going from Europe, US, and UK to APAC sometimes struggle because they have got no documentation. They don't. It's a different clinical flow. They've not actually understood the market. Again, it's like the same across the world. Is that how do you know what you're needing? Clearance is fairly straightforward. You can work out how you're going to get clearance. But clearance isn't the end of it because you've got clinical reimbursement, cyber, you've got adoption, you've got clinical flow. They say that it all joins together.
Yeah. Well, Edwin, very interesting conversation. We are very looking forward to continue this conversation in Hong Kong the next 26 to 28 August. Thank you very much for being with us today and see you in Hong Kong very soon.
Thank you very much. I look forward to catch up in Hong Kong.